My name is Nora Gelfrin. I'm the Director of Sexuality Education and Training and Advocates for Youth. I'd like to welcome you to this module on answering students' questions about sexual health. Advocates for Youth is a nonprofit that works with schools and community based organizations on issues related to sex education, and we have a resource center on our website. So we know young people have lots of questions about sexuality. Sometimes these questions get asked while we're teaching. Sometimes they're asked after class or in the hallway one on one. Sometimes they're blurted out at the most inopportune times or asked in an anonymous question box. It can often make us feel like we want to hit the panic button, but there are some really easy tips we can follow to try to better answer their questions. Let's first break down the different kinds of questions that students often ask us. There are generally five different kinds. There are factual questions, am I normal, personal belief or experience questions, questions about values, and those that have to do with slang words. Let's look at these a little bit more in detail. Factual questions are generally pretty straightforward. You can usually find good, reliable sources of information to get an objective answer, and you just need to decide how much detail you want to use. But generally, there's sources where you can figure out this information if it's not something you already know or it's not covered in your course. The questions about am I normal really sound more like, is it okay if, and this is when young people are trying to compare themselves to their peer group and trying to figure out if what they're experiencing is really common compared to others their age and at their developmental level. The questions about your personal belief or experience are those when young people are really looking to you as a trusted adult to get a little bit of advice or a little bit of guidance. But generally, it's best not to disclose a lot of personal information, but rather to give a more general or vague answer. Then there are the questions about values. These can oftentimes feel a little bit tricky, but there's a really easy three-step technique you can use to respond to these questions. You can start by saying, some people feel or believe this way at one end of the continuum, while other people feel or believe this other way at the other end of the continuum. What's most important is for you to figure out what you believe, and it can help to talk with a trusted adult. So that three-step technique can oftentimes really help with those values-based questions. Lastly, there are the slang word questions. These can often feel really shocking or scary. Generally, it's young people just really trying to figure out what these different words and phrases mean that they've heard. It can help to just use medically accurate information to redefine terms that you're familiar with. So, here are some general tips that can help when you're trying to respond. Stalling for a little extra time can help. Asking for a little more context to clarify where the question is coming from. Make sure you really understand what they're asking versus what you think they're asking, because oftentimes they can be a little disconnected. Turning the question back to the person asking to see what they know about it or what they've heard can be helpful. Sometimes referring to someone more appropriate to respond, a physician, a school nurse, a school counselor, social worker, maybe even a parent or a caregiver. Sometimes being able to check with your supervisor to make sure that you are able to answer that question given the topic and the grade level that's being asked. You can always follow up with a student as appropriate at the end of class or the next time you see them. Make sure you answered all of their questions. And lastly, some tips for you as the teacher when you go to practice answering these questions. Don't forget to breathe. I know it sounds silly, but sometimes we forget when we get so nervous. Make sure that you're truthful in your responses and you're not making things up in an effort to be cool. That doesn't help anybody. Also, really pay attention to the music, and by that we mean the body language, the tone of voice. Those things communicate a lot about how you're feeling about answering, in addition to the words coming out of your mouth. It's also a really good opportunity to model comfort around a topic or to show discomfort if the topic is one that's unsettling or concerning. It's okay to not know what the answer is, as things are changing all the time. Just make sure that you find out and follow up. And it's really okay to keep a sense of humor, using it to diffuse some nervousness or anxiety, or if it's just part of your style as well, that can sometimes be a really fun way to respond to certain questions too. So we hope that some of these tips and techniques will be helpful as you now go ahead and practice answering some student questions.